According to reports, the Florida Panthers will become the 31st NHL franchise to play in an outdoor game.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, December 12th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here on another edition of the show, a special edition of the podcast here to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers. And once again, over these last few years, the Florida Panthers have made so much history with just being a contender year in and year out, winning a Stanley Cup. And for years, the Florida Panthers have been in discussions of hosting an outdoor game and even playing in one. 5-10 years ago, the dream of playing in an outdoor game seemed improbable. But according to Elliotte Friedman of Hockey Night in Canada and Sportsnet, the Florida Panthers are set to host an outdoor game come the 2025-26 season. And here to discuss more of that and what upcoming for the Florida Panthers and the future of the outdoor game that the Florida Panthers will be hosting come next year. Who else to bring on this podcast then Florida Panthers historian and Marlins historian Francisco Oporta. And you're Francisco, you are the very first person I thought of when it came to this topic, and this is just something we've been tweeting, texting back and forth about, and with these reports, and David Pragnota of the Fourth Period confirmed it, and so did Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald, and it is coming to South Florida, and I'm super excited. Welcome back to the show.
So I've been harping on this for a few years now. Like, this is going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just going to happen. And so, everybody writes down the laughing emojis, and there's no way logistically it can't happen. And like, it'll happen. The Panthers just need to get good, and they have the venue. It's really legitimately the only venue in the state of Florida that could do this.
Yeah.
So, especially because the other one that used to host hockey just had its roof torn off. So, it's happening here. So I'm very glad, and I'm set to go. I've got my Marlins hat on, my Panthers jersey. It's going to be a very conflicting, weird time for me to go when that does happen. But I can't wait.
Yeah, and think about it. Just with the Stadium Series that the Columbus Blue Jackets will be hosting with against the Detroit Red Wings, the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry kind of feel to it. That later on this year, it'll be number 30. And then now the Panthers, the 31st team to do it, the only one left to play in an outdoor game is the Utah Hockey Club, formerly of the Arizona Coyotes. But of course, in order to receive an outdoor game, you need to have some type of relevance in the NHL. And the Panthers throughout this last 5-year stretch, the NHL is striking while the iron is hot for the Florida Panthers here. And we've seen different types of venues host Stadium Series games. Dodger Stadium with Ducks Kings. Wrigley Field is going to be doing it a second time now. Fenway Park twice. The Big House, Notre Dame Stadium, everything in that. But now 40-plus outdoor regular season games. We had the first one regular season game in 2003. All the previous ones were preseason games, and then consistently every year since 2008, starting in that one in Buffalo between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Buffalo Sabres there. But we've even seen the NHL tap into non-traditional markets like Dallas recently in their matchup against the Nashville Predators, NC State, where the Carolina Hurricanes faced the Washington Capitals, and now going into South Florida here, but also the logistics of the technology of maintaining ice. The NHL's got it down to a science, and this is why it can work. in a place like Lone Depot Park?
They've been playing with this for quite a while now. And once again, Lone Depot Park is probably the only venue that is ready for this in the state of Florida. Every other venue is an outdoor venue. And they say they need the space for at least 20 to 25 days just to lay the sheet down and then make sure that it's working up to code. And the game will most likely be played at night.
Yes.
We will have the roof closed until I guess they get the go ahead from the ice experts to say, hey, we can, like, if the humidity's up a certain point around that time frame, I would assume the Panthers would get the Winter Classic, which is around December, like the end of the New Year's, around New Year. So I think that would probably be the best sweet spot for South Florida to maintain its as close to frigid temperatures as possible. It's going to hit 60 degrees out here in Palm Beach County tonight. So that's as best as we could hope for if it ever does reach down there to Miami. But I think it'll probably be a night game, Winter Classic, either New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, or around that weekend afterwards. So, I mean, I think they've really put this together. They wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't doable. And we've already seen one nightmare scenario that happened in a spot that wasn't. It was the Lake Tahoe game, the sunlight. And they just realized they had to improvise to push that game to nighttime. South Florida, Lone Depot Park, the roof closes fairly quickly. It takes about like 10, 15 minutes for it to close. And it's, I think when you go to a Marlins game, I don't know, I've never, at every Marlins game I've been to, it's always been a very comfortable temperature.
Yes.
I don't know how cold they can make the inside be, but in all honesty, it doesn't really need to be where the fans are sitting. It's just the ice that needs to maintain its structure. So hopefully they've got it down to the point where they can keep the ice nice and crisp. It doesn't puddle up. It doesn't get soft. And we can actually have some pretty good hockey.
Yeah, and there's also a big criteria when it comes to even having the roof open during the summer. So I can only imagine what that would be if they were to open it for an outdoor game, if for the Florida Panthers, if they were to host it here. But thankfully, in the month of January / late December, it could be more possible, as maybe we are lucky and we get something along the 50-degree temperature in that time. But also, let's talk about the opponent of who the Panthers could face. A lot of people want to see the Battle of Florida. 5 consecutive years of the Eastern Conference representative coming from Florida to 3 playoff series between the two teams. Makes sense between that, and also with Tampa, you mentioned the roof collapsing at Raymond James Stadium. Also, it wouldn't be original to go back to the Trop with them because of the fact that they played hockey there before, and then of course Raymond James does not have a roof, but Battle of Florida, we could get one. But also, you had a little bit of a different idea of where possibly the NHL could go in this one, especially because there's a specific team that comes to South Florida every single December on the NHL schedule.
So I think I would assume my best bet, if I were a betting man, I would assume it would be the New York Rangers. And I have several reasons why. One, yes, the New York Rangers do come around South Florida around the Christmas, holiday, New Year's time frame. So it's the New York Rangers, the Montreal Canadiens. It's been that way for several years now. Sometimes every now and then they switch out, maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs, maybe the Boston Bruins or somebody else like that. But it's usually New York and Montreal. So I would assume that the NHL would want a large market to be showcased for that game, as much as the Panthers have been growing as far as popularity is concerned. I've really liked the fact that at every Panthers road game, you see a nice swath of fans there now, especially behind the bench. That's always nice to see, especially even in Western Conference cities. You've been able to see that, but it's a New York market. I would assume the NHL would want that market, an original 6 team, to be the opponent going against the Panthers. Hopefully the Panthers are defending Stanley Cup champions again when that happens too, to kind of to kind of build it from there. They played in the Eastern Conference most recently, the Eastern Conference Final. So there's another connection there. The New York Rangers cannot host an outdoor game as a home team because they're contractually obligated at Madison Square Garden to play all of their home games there. So that's why they've been cleverly used as the road team at different outdoor venues with the Stadium Series that they had, like at Citi Field, at Yankee Stadium.
At Life.
They had the Buffalo Sabres as the home team against, I think at Citi Field against the New York Rangers, even though Buffalo's nowhere near compared to the Rangers. So it was more of a Rangers home game than the Sabres home game. It makes sense that they would have that connection with the New York Rangers, and the Panthers have played them for so long. There's another connection, of course. If you want to tie it into the very, very little baseball history that's been great with the team that actually plays at Lone Depot with the Marlins, you have that one World Series, the New York Yankees versus the Florida Marlins. You have another connection there. They did it at the All-Star game with the Home Run Derby, where they pitted New York Yankees slugger versus the Marlins slugger. So I would assume that they would want that connection as well. They can kind of play off of that too. It makes sense to be the New York Rangers in comparison to any other opponent right now. And I mean, the only other, maybe Boston could be an opponent, but the connection, there's no real Red Sox Marlins connection. The Pats were beating up the Dolphins in the division for several years, even though the Dolphins always seem to win a home game against the Patriots during their dynasty era. Yeah. The Tampa Bay Lightning is all right. It doesn't move my needle, and I don't think the NHL thinks it would move the rest of the nation's needle as well. You already had a Southern versus Southern Winter Classic between Nashville and Dallas. Let's see. I don't know if they would want to throw a Canadian opponent in there, so I don't see Montreal, especially the fact that the Canadiens are not really up there right now as far as competitiveness is concerned. They haven't reached those levels just yet. Toronto, sure, but at the same time, their kind of rivalry, if you want to call it that, because the Panthers kind of been owning them, with the Panthers lately isn't really that deep. Exactly. And I can't even think of any other Eastern Conference opponent. The Pittsburgh Penguins, if you want to throw it back to the fact that they were the Panthers' first home opponent when they're in their first game at the Miami Arena, they could do that throwback just to see if that could do something as well. Sidney Crosby, that could always be a thing. But it depends. I don't think that connection is that deep because the Panthers and the Penguins don't really have much of anything going as far as rivalry at all. Most recently, but you have to go back to 96 for something like that. And I wouldn't think they would throw any of the Stanley Cup rematches. I don't think they would throw the Edmonton Oilers into that as well, nor the Vegas Golden Knights, nor you can't even throw back to the Colorado Avalanche either. So if you start going down each opponent that they could face, it only makes sense that it be the New York Rangers.
Yeah. You got to mix in the history between the two franchises that are playing there, maybe something with baseball. So with all of that, it makes sense to either the Tampa Bay Lightning, Rangers, or the Bruins. Or at least those are my three that I think are more likely that the Panthers would face at Lone Depot Park come 2025-26. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss what kind of uniforms should we see in the Stadium Series and or Winter Classic game that the Panthers will be hosting at Lone Depot Park. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And we're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 300 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and search engines help you find the quality candidates fast. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality of matches compared to other job sites. You can leverage over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day. Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Listeners to the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon to support our show by saying you heard about it on Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Also, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and you could tackle all the NFL action there. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out all the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports bet partner of the NFL. Segment number 2 here on this Thursday, December 12th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Here with Florida Panthers historian and Marlins historian Francisco Oporta to discuss more about everything of the news of the Florida Panthers set to host an outdoor game come 2025-26 at Lone Depot Park in Little Havana, just 2 miles away from their original home of the Miami Arena, and a connection with their, I would maybe call it expansion cousins with the Marlins, their expansion brothers, more of the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, coming together in 1993 by the same owner, Wade Huizenga. So wondering, and let's when it comes to the uniforms and for the outdoor games, for at least in recent years, a lot of fans might want a certain color for the in a tie for a baseball team. I know some might want teal, but I think the NHL is going to go to the direction of home team dominant colors. And my wishful thinking is the old Florida Marlins text from their road jersey that says Florida because Florida Panthers, Florida Marlins there. And then with the old Leaping Panther right below it. That's wishful thinking, but I do not think they're going to go in that direction. I do think that there's a possibility that they could go to the Leaping Panther, but ownership put a modern version of it on as far as the alternate logo for the Panthers. So I think they're going to go for that version of the Leaping Panther. But then the shoulder will have the Stadium Series / outdoor game, whatever one it ends up being, and maybe a little bit of the FLA with the sun or the palm tree with the sun and the hockey stick there. What direction do you think that the NHL and the Florida Panthers will go if there are when they release the uniforms there for the game?
So it's interesting that we're trying to throw it back, because usually it depends, right? If it's a winter classic, the NHL has routinely with all of their teams made them seem very retro as far as throwback is concerned, old time hockey, something that throws back to like the 60s or the 70s or and beyond that, going back in the past. While the Stadium Series is where they kind of play with designs and do some things that are a little more out there, right? The Tampa Bay Lightning were in a Stadium Series against the Colorado Avalanche, and they had like the big giant lightning bolt, and it was an interesting thing. It was different, so it really depends on what they want to do now. And this is also, I guess, a chance for Fanatics, as they're the uniform provider now, to see if they can flex their muscle as far as some actual design is concerned, instead of copying and pasting stuff onto things very cheaply. Anyways, it's hard to say. I would prefer the Winter Classic, because then we can kind of play back into some faux back designs. Even though South Florida does have some hockey history, but it's been very short spurts around there, and they're going to have to dig deep for some of those connections. There was supposed to be a WHA team down here, the Miami Screaming Eagles.
Yep.
The team never got off the floor, and they eventually moved up to Philadelphia to become the Blazers. I don't know. I've actually designed a concept. Sheesh, it was probably like 10, 11 years ago now, based on the Screaming Eagles design. The Panthers do have some of those concept prototype designs that they've got. You can see some of them at the former Den of Honor back there. I think it's the Jameson Bar out there at the Emirate Bank Arena. And they might be able to pull from there and try and see if they can create a sort of throwback, faux back design from that. They do have an actual faux back design from the 2009, what people assume are the powder blue jerseys. It was mainly navy, but with the light blue.
Just with the face.
Yes, exactly. With the circular roundel panther head in as well as that Florida Panthers. And it did look like what a retro design would look like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a possibility they could take that, maybe throw in the original Panthers logo, cat head up there, maybe the modern one that they've got right now, and put it on a red base with maybe look like with navy, and then make kind of sort of look like their original road jerseys in a sense. I know people would want a red uniform, and I put out a poll. The red uniform is winning out. The navy uniform is in second because currently the Panthers don't have a navy uniform, and it would make sense to have an alternate navy with the Leaping Panther as well. But I've always been keen to, what if they throw it back so much, because the Panthers are from 93. The home jerseys used to be white. What if they have a white Winter Classic uniform that could go with that? I think a lot of people did grow up in the era where white was the home jersey, and some people still believe that white should be the home jerseys as well. And in baseball, traditionally, white is for the home team.
Yep.
So they could make a little connection there as well and have it white. But as far as designs are concerned, my head's all over the place. They've done the reverse retros already. Yep. So we've seen what the Panthers' old design could look like in a modern template. We've seen it with the navy. We saw the reverse retro with the blue jerseys with the hockey stick and palm tree at the center. There's a lot they could work with. I think I would assume if I had to go, I'd probably go with your safe bet of, hey, leaping cat crest. Everybody loves the leaping cat. Whether they do the actual throwback to it or not, I doubt it. But they could use the modern one right now because really, this ownership has pushed what they've got right now, and it's worked. Okay, this is the best era of Panthers history. We're living it right now, so they probably will try and pull from. Gosh, I'd have to look at some obscure South Florida hockey history to see if I could find some old uniform designs that they could pull from. But it'll be interesting to see what's most likely the Panthers in-house will try and look at, as well as the NHL and Fanatics.
Yeah, and you mentioned the big lightning bolt for the Tampa Bay Lightning when they had their Stadium Series game against the Predators. The mountain for the Colorado Avalanche was all over the top and the bottom, so maybe we could see a Leaping Panther all the way from the head up top and then all the way to at least the waist side. You had something to say?
I do want two things. Whoever, I would hope it's Sergei Bobrovsky. I would assume he'd probably want to be the starter for that. I want the modern version of the Van Beesbrook mask. Okay, just the entire in like this solid gold that's like shining, and it's just the modern Panther right now. Its head, but it looks like the mouth and the face and the head. I want that, just as a throwback to that, and I want them to do the claw gloves, because initially the Panthers were their hockey gloves were gonna have the claw designs on them. And this would probably be the best time to actually implement that as a one-off.
And coming out of the Panther mouth like they did in the Miami Arena.
they could pull it out from the American Brick Arena, stick it in front of the Marlins dugout, and they'd have to move it to get out of the way of people watching the game, but they could do that too.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you're not going to have like any fire aesthetics because that risk with the ice and the humidity, like you're not going to
bring in the flames from the Miami Heat game.
Yeah, they're not going to do it. I highly doubt they're going to pull that for that with the risk of the ice. But you put the Panther mouth in order for them to come out from, along with honoring thy history with the goalie mask. I mean, I think that's just a very great combination to honor the fans who have been there from the start, back 2 miles away from their original home, celebrating the sport of hockey, them being champions, and then showcasing it across the sports world as yes, they will be competing with the college football playoff during this time of year. But hey, for South Florida, it'll be for sure a time of celebration, growth of the game, and also attracting other fans from baseball, the baseball connection there. So that's also another thing that's very important for this game. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3. We're going to discuss festivities around the ballpark, alumni involvement, and also music performances. What could happen there? We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. And here's why you need to get started with Prize Picks today. You can win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. You could win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. No need to win, and the $50 is guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers fun weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where select players' projections are discounted up to 25%. This week on Prize Picks, I'm eyeing the big hockey board of Jack Hughes more than 4 shots on goal, Artemi Panarin more than 1 assist, and also Sam Reinhart scoring more than 1 assist as well. It's so simple to make the picks, and you can have fun with your friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly, and you could do that all on Prize Picks. Run your game. Third and final segment on this Thursday, December 12th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday, discussing everything for the Florida Panthers and the reports of them hosting an outdoor game. Nothing official from the NHL and the Florida Panthers, but if national reporters are saying it and multiple are saying it, chances are it's going to happen for the Florida Panthers here. So festivities around the ballpark, probably going to have like a little bit of a fan fest. On Saturday home games, the Marlins usually have the events on their West Plaza for them. And it's going to be interesting how this is going to work because Little Havana is a little bit of a cramped area. Let's be nice about it. They're trying to make improvements around kind of like how the community around the ballparks of St. Louis, Atlanta, and even Texas for them. Do you want to share us kind of like what the little project is and if it'll be ready by the time this game goes on?
Oh man. Where do I start with this? So yeah, the Marlins have had quite a difficult time attracting people to the ballpark, and them being terrible hasn't really helped.
Yeah.
But the trend as of the last decade or so, especially, has been for all of these stadiums, and now it's moving on to other NHL arenas. The Panthers are trying to do something like that as well around Emirates Bank Arena to try and transform it. Every other team is looking to do that as well because it's a new revenue source for them, and to have their venue be a year-round place for people to go and visit, even in the off season. So the Marlins are desperately trying to do that, but they plopped Lone Depot Park where the former Orange Bowl was, and that is in the middle of a neighborhood. It is one of the last of of the stadiums that is in a neighborhood of that kind. You don't really see that anymore. It's the closest you could probably get to is Wrigley Field or Fenway. And so it's made it difficult especially to get in and out of that ballpark as well. To all of the Panthers fans out there who have never been to Lone Depot Park, leave early. Leave early, please. Leave and try and get to that ballpark at least an hour before, because if not, you're going to be waiting in traffic. And hopefully that it'll be a New Year's Eve or New Year's Day type of game. And it'll be on the weekend, hopefully, and people will have the day off. And so you have plenty of time to kind of make a day of the Winter Classic or the outdoor game. But get there early. And yes, the Marlins have had a lot of trouble trying to get people to the ballpark. There's not really much to do just yet. They've tried to improve it with some things here and there, but there's a lot of empty retail space there that they just have not been able to get success for hanging around the ballpark before games, after games. There's a Subway. You guys can go visit the Subway there. There's a Wendy's across the street if you want to go over there too. That's open after games. But I don't know. I don't know if some of anything like that would be ready. Lone Depot Park itself has incrementally improved since it was open. They have a few more amenities now that they've been trying and make it enticing, but it's really difficult given the fact that the team is terrible. They don't have much money to spend. And but I will say they have done good jobs with big events. We've had the World Baseball Classic. That was a rounding success. I mean, the Marlins hosted every round of that event. They're going to do it again for the next World Baseball Classic. The Serie del Caribe they just did right now as well. They've hosted college bowl games too. They've
Savannah
hosted
Bananas.
The Savannah Bananas, who draw better than the Marlins. They've hosted big concerts as well, like Beyonce. They've had Kanye West there. So they've hosted big events at the ballpark, just not a playoff game for the Marlins. And it's possible they've had soccer games as well. So I think the venue is ready, but I think they'll do a fine job, especially given the fact that they'll have plenty of time to prepare for this now. If they're in serious talks right now, they're trying to work out the logistics, monies, and all that type of stuff. I'm going to assume it's going to happen, and the Marlins desperately need that money.
No doubt. And with the Winter Classic going on in Chicago, the announcements of Chance the Rapper and Smashing Pumpkins, two artists from Chicago, are going to be part of it. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of musical performance we're going to see from South Florida based artists. I mean, we've already seen Flo Rida and DJ Khaled perform during the Stanley Cup final. Maybe we get a Steve Aoki, Rick Ross, maybe even Pitbull.
I would assume we're going to get Pitbull.
Yeah.
If I had to guess one person that they're probably going to try and get, it'll be Pitbull. You could go even more classic with like Gloria Estefan or somebody like that as well.
Enrique Iglesias, Trick Daddy, but there's even a Broward County band, Newfound Glory, that could perform there. Dashboard Confessional, but they're not on the same level of popularity as those other artists there for them. But also, one thing that's going to be cool about this event is most stadium series or Winter Classic games, they usually have the college teams play a game around there before or after. So maybe a chance for FAU, Miami, and UF possibly to get some hockey games around that. So that's also another cool thing around the community. But also alumni. I want to talk a little bit about alumni involved for the festivities. I mean, we've seen it in like the Heritage Classic with like the guys like Ron Francis and Dave Lowry. The Winter Classic at the Big House, we've seen even meetings of former teammates, even if it's not a specific game, but alumni coming back. And Vladislav Konstantinov, although his career ended short, he reunited with that Red Wings team at the Big House when the Detroit Red Wings faced the Toronto Maple Leafs there. But also the obvious ones of Bill Lindsay, Jovo Luongo, Peter Worrell. Those are ones for the hockey side of things for South Florida, but also there's going to be that baseball connection. I'm not sure if Ken Griffey Jr. was at the Winter Classic for Kraken Golden Knights. I'm not sure. I should have looked that up right before, but Marlins connections. You got to have Mr. Marlin there, Jeff Conine, right?
Yeah, there's going to be you know what the beauty of this is that a lot of players do end up staying in South Florida that played for both the Panthers and the Marlins. So there's plenty of alumni down here who make their homes here even after they've retired. So I think we've got a ton of them as well. We could have Pavel Bure make an appearance. We'd love to see the Russian Rocket. If they're playing the Rangers, he played for both franchises. It kind of works out there. You've got plenty of guys that you can pull from. Maybe even guys that were recent. Maybe some guys from even like that 2012 team, the 2016 team as well. You got Sean Thornton. He works for the team as well. You can pull out Stephen Weiss. You can bring out Tomas Fleischmann and Christopher Stieg, Sean Bergenheim. Maybe you could try and make amends with, mend that bridge, because I think they've kind of had some rough relations with Olli Jokinen, so maybe they can fix that as well going forward. Tomas Vokoun. You guys, there's plenty of great goalies that have played for the Panthers as well that you can pull out. Maybe Jose Theodore wants to pop out here as well. So I mean, there's so many guys you could get to kind of acknowledge the Panthers, the early beginnings of the initial great era at the beginning, the surprise run to the Stanley Cup final. You can bring some guys from that dark era as well that did stick around. Stephen Weiss. Maybe try and see if people can forgive Jay Bouwmeester as well. Now that they both have the franchise has won a cup. He's won a cup as well. Maybe try and fix that, right? Nathan Horton, see what he's doing.
Especially if it's against Boston. If it's against Boston, Nathan Horton could come.
Yeah, you could bring Nathan Horton around. David Booth as well. There's a bunch of guys you could pull out and see if they can stop by and play in an alumni game as well. And just, the Marlins alumni, there's plenty of guys that you can. I mean, they just, I guess in 2023 was a great 30th anniversary that they brought back a lot of guys to kind of celebrate the 97 team, the 2003 team. Miguel Cabrera, I'm sure he has a home down here. I think Pudge Rodriguez is down here as well. So bring out some guys and see if they can have some fun at the hockey game. I do also want to talk about what would they walk into the ballpark with, because so far it's been a thing at these outdoor games where guys will come into the stadium with some sort of getup that kind of either that harkens to, like, for the opponent where they're from, and for the home team where they're from as well. So you had the guys in Seattle, they were in the fisherman, whatever, that place, that fish market uniform, whatever. They were wearing that type of stuff. So what would the Marlins wear or the Panthers wear going in there? It's Miami, right? What could you see them wearing walking into that ballpark? Some Latin flair?
Maybe a swimsuit and a shirt. Keep it simple, and some sandals.
I need them to look like the guys at Domino Park,
the button down shirt, something like that.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, going in with Marlins jerseys would be okay. Yeah, everybody loves teal, obviously, but I think they would want something to kind of harken to the fact that this is Miami. Because we kind of sort of saw shades of it during the 2023 All-Star festivities, where they had the Vice uniforms for the All-Star jerseys and that type of stuff. So maybe they can kind of go all in on it with the Miami outdoor game.
Yeah. So you're going to see a lot of neon colors, chances are, in there as they walk into the stadium, more than likely.
I mean, I don't know if you remember the Marlins opening night game against the Cardinals for the stadium, and they came in with was it the flamingo dancers?
Yes.
They could have the players walking in with them and kind of harken back to that. Just not a decrepit Muhammad Ali, please.
Yeah. For me, that would be for sure something to look out for of how they'll enter, and everything, who will be part of all the festivities of the alumni and so much more around that. So definitely something.
The only interesting thing would be, will they harken to some of the football history as well, given the fact that it is The Orange Bowl site.
Maybe have Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, Bryant McKinney.
Or you can always pull out Dan Marino.
Yeah. Why not? But Francisco, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast to discuss everything of the Florida Panthers reports of hosting an outdoor game, and it's almost officially official. Tell everybody where they can follow you and your work online, my friend.
So at Marlins History, we just traded Jake Berger, so that's fine. We were supposed to have the high number 1 overall pick for the MLB draft, and we fell to 7th. Things are going great. So they really need this Winter Classic right now, because it's really the only thing I'm looking forward to as a baseball fan, which is sad to say. So at Marlins History, or at FLA Cats History on Twitter X, Panthers History on Blue Sky, and then I have FLA Panthers History on Instagram. I have a TikTok as well. So find me there. I've got merch. Me and Jerseys 305 are still working on those Vice hockey jerseys right now. We're finalizing and we're putting the finishing touches on them. So hopefully we'll have those released soon enough. And yeah. So, and Armando's got a sample there, if you're watching the video version of this, of I could see that on a Winter Classic jersey if the Panthers want to give me a call.
Yeah. What percent royalties would you get? So let's see. Maybe you could retire from your day job. Who knows?
I get a Stanley Cup ring out of it.
Maybe. But Francisco, thank you so much. And I will see you again soon, my friend.
All right. Go Fish.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Francisco Oporta, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.